So hello everyone, welcome to 3Deemee's webinar series Across the Chain 3D in Fashion. Today we are thrilled to embark on a captivating exploration of the revolutionary impact of 3D technology on the world of fashion. Our webinar series promises insightful discussions and expert perspectives, and to kick off this exciting journey, we're honored to introduce our distinguished panelists for today's session. Our two panelists today are OJ Skjelten, CEO of Embodee, and Erica Horne, owner of CAD for Fashion. Both panelists bring wealth of knowledge and experience to our virtual stage, shaping the landscape of 3D innovation in the fashion industry. So let's dive in. Could you please both introduce your company, role, and the problem you are trying to solve? Erica, if you'd like to begin.
Yeah, sure. My name is Erica Horne. My company is CAD for Fashion. And I started CAD for Fashion to provide more relevant live training for CAD skills in the fashion and textiles industry. It was a niche that I felt was underserved and very much in need of some help when it comes to digital skills.
And oh, sorry, I was just going to jump on at the end of that. Yeah, so my name is OJ Skjelten, which makes everyone slightly confused. So I'm just OJ among friends. I'm the CEO of Embodee. I'm not the founder, I'm the CEO. I've been there now for, well, it's not quite a year yet, but it sort of feels like it's been a bit of a year. So we basically provide a web platform that allows creative teams to work with 3D assets, to produce design variations and do other things without the need for the kind of training that is provided by Erica and co. So we are more of a platform that takes over after the authoring tools end, in a way, but we'll come back to that.
Yeah, perfect. So just to start off, so how have you both seen the landscape of digital fashion or 3D technology evolve over the past few years, especially in terms of incorporating different types of 3D tech?
No, the interesting thing about it has been that there's been a lot of promise to the process, a lot of expectations in the process, but then also I think a lot of disillusionment. The idea with digital product creation was that it was going to be a process that takes you end to end and so solves all problems and like frees up resources and helps your margins and reduces waste, increases sustainability, and all those kind of good things. And it certainly can do that, but what we are seeing in practice perhaps is that it isn't quite delivering on its promise, or at least that is the perception. And for a lot of market actors, that also is the reality. So I think there is this divergence between how we all thought it would go and what the expectation in the market was that it would go, and what the practical reality, at least in 2024, is. Things are changing there, so I'm optimistic about it. But I do think that there is a lot of promise that hasn't yet been fulfilled when it comes to digital product creation, and we haven't quite got where we should be yet.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think that it's very exciting. There has been lots of change. Change is constantly happening at the moment. But it's a challenge, it's a big challenge. And I feel like there's a lot of pressure to really make the most of the technology that's out there and do all of the things all of the time. And actually it's a challenge. And yeah, you're right, people aren't really seeing the results of their investments yet. I also don't think there is a clear way through for anybody. It's very subjective and very specific to each sort of use case of 3D technology. I think it's just very early in the practical application of digital product creation at the moment.
Yeah, so like adding on to that, so you guys mentioned that there's challenges. Would you mention like any specific challenges? Do you think it's like a willingness to adopt them, or is it that there's too many options, or what do you think is the biggest challenge that you're seeing?
It's a bit of everything, I think. I mean, one of the things you would have hoped for was that there was a little bit of an end-to-end thinking with it, right? Because if you're in a digital product creation process, but in the middle somewhere, someone insists on not working digital, then you don't have a workflow and you don't have a chain through. And this breaks everything down. That's really a tricky, big challenge to work across products and get this thing to work. There's a skill gap, which is Erica is addressing, but it's difficult, right, to get up. And you notice certain groups in the industry are not terribly interested in becoming really good at building tools because they feel like that's not my thing. And so there's a lot of friction in the system currently, I feel. I don't know if Erica, you see the same thing.
Yeah, I think it is disruption. I think it does all come down to the disruption that it's causing. It's the disruption to the way we've always done things, the way we like to do things. Again, there's no one really knows the right plan. There's lots of strategies they could and routes they could take and different ways of implementing different software, but there aren't a huge amount of success stories to model on at the moment. There's no one that's really there with it. And I'm still quite skeptical of those that say that they are, because I think the disruption to train the staff, the disruption in the business model, the processes that are used internally and with suppliers and other external people that you may deal with. I think the disruption is the biggest challenge for everyone at the moment. Even if they are really keen to get going, what we're finding is that it will cause too many problems for too many people. And there is never a right time. Let's face it, in the fashion cycle, when do we have a downtime? There's always a deadline looming, and always something that takes a higher precedent and priority over starting something new and laying down best practices. That's what we found anyway.
I think just add on that for a second. One of the interesting things we have seen is when you talk to people and you sort of show them an improved workflow and you say you can do this improved workflow, you have to work really, really hard to convince people they should take the chance of changing even the slightest bit of the workflow, because things are so set in a way. And the odd thing is, if you look outside of the apparel industry, you'll see a lot of examples. Like I come from consumer electronics previously, and where some of the things that is done there routinely would still be a bit of sci-fi in apparel. And to me, that's a bit surprising, because you can look to examples in other industries where this stuff has already happened. Digital product creation has gone a lot further, and people are used to this, and that's like a completely accepted truth. But in apparel, things are a bit conservative.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of mistrust of technology, and I think I'll talk about it a little bit later. But I think the way that creatives and fashion designers are trained, and their dreams and hopes and aspirations when they start this, I don't think digital quite fits a lot of the time. I like to call the fashion industry reluctant tech users. My job is to force people to, I like to very gently help them enjoy using digital creative technology, but we do meet a lot of that resistance that you explained, definitely.
Mindset to some degree, right? It's an interesting example. Actually, we're doing a lecture series now in Sri Lanka at Morituva University in Sri Lanka. And it's being very well received, but the students they're going to be doing, I think, flow, but only in the third year. Right? Which is very late. Very late, it's kind of crazy. So they actually get introduced to us, and come back to what we are later, but they get introduced to us kind of before they get introduced to authoring tools. It's kind of a bit crazy, but the enthusiasm level is really high because they know this is out there. They want to be competitive in the market, right? So they need skills and experience, but traditionally it's not been trained that much. And there was a discourse recently now online about whether or not fashion schools in the US and Europe are doing their students a bit of a disservice by not taking this seriously, because they train people to be in one market. When they come out in reality, there is a lot of 3D and digital product there, especially in the big names. And if you're not prepared for that, that's a bit of a problem. Yeah.
Exactly. I have many words to say on that subject.
So with that in mind, in terms of like you mentioned a bit about what people are hesitant. So what do you think is like realistically achievable in terms of the greatest opportunities in 2024, given the challenges that you both mentioned?
Yeah. You want to take that one first, Erica? I can get
it's a difficult one. That one.
Yeah.
I think is so what we see with our clients, there's such a sliding scale of readiness.
Mm-hmm.
So for some clients, they might finally eliminate some samples after using Clo for however many years. For some clients, they might have another demonstration of how Clo works and an example of how it might change their workflow, and then they may think about that for another 6 months. So there's I think it's very individual to each, because even the main high street brands, they all have their own ways of working. Like their overview might be quite similar, but internally, and I do find this all comes back to individuals as well. It's that mindset as well, that actually if the design manager isn't on the 3D train, then you're not going to make any headway. Whereas a new person comes into that role and it might be green lights ahead. So I think it's a really difficult question to answer as a whole industry.
I do think there is an interesting trend that's happening right now. We're seeing it. There is Embodee, of course, but there's others too. Even both the authoring tool companies. I mean, you have Style Zone from Browseware, and you have Closet from Clo. Somebody should get that marketing department an award for picking that name. But it's essentially all realizations that we have some challenges in how we collaborate and how we work together on product development, and because the traditional way of thinking, right, was that like you go to your authoring tool and you make your product and then done, right? But that's not how the process works. There's a lot of steps after that, and between that process finishing and the customer out on the other end, there are so many steps. And that's funny because you have 3D and digital product creation all the way up to here, and then you do like screenshots in PowerPoint presentations and emails after that, and it's like, what? But there's a realization, of course, that this doesn't work, right? So that's why you're seeing all these different tools now, of which we are one, looking at how can you take it further after you have done it with an authoring tool. How do you take it from there all the way to and because that's required if you want to have anything that looks like an end-to-end kind of solution, and that's the only way to really start unlocking the benefits of digital product creation. The authoring tools are not going anywhere; they're as important as ever, but we need to not stop the digital process after we've made a product.
I agree. One of the main issues that we see is that if the 3D journey starts with the technical team, they will choose a software that's very technical, fat and cutter friendly. And then if the designers kick it off, they'll choose a software that's very designer friendly, that's less familiar to the technical team, therefore inferior. And it's really difficult. And I think because of the amount of solutions out there and the cost associated to all of those, it becomes a non-starter because you don't know which one to go for. And research can only take you so far. They're all very new. And like I say, without those sort of really transparent role models and use studies to sort of model after, it can be quite difficult.
OJ, you touched on how you saw in Sri Lanka the students were interested in learning more about the different technologies. Erica, are you finding that same sort of feedback when you go and you perform your education?
Yeah, definitely. I think they're all hungry for it. This is the generation that have been using iPads from a very early age. There is a bit of a misconception that they are all absolute tech savvy, like pick it up really quick. Everyone still has their own learning styles, and digital sometimes isn't compatible with some of those. So they're not all sort of geniuses when it comes to technology, but they are definitely just more used to the environment, and also just excited for change. I think that age group tends to be more excited for change as we get older, less so. But what we find is challenges again. So even if the universities are really keen, universities move so much slower than businesses. Like the agile is not a word I would use for universities, establishments. It takes like 3 years for a change to be thought about, let alone implemented. So their struggle at the moment is how quickly things are moving, and also this big pot of money that needs to exist for something that hasn't been needed before. In terms of training, external tutors if they don't have the training in-house, and also that big, not just the software cost, but the hardware that is involved in running some of this software. So where they've got away with Illustrator on an OK PC, they now need to upgrade to a very high spec PC with the varying different 3D modeling tools they need to create the final result the students expect to be able to create. We're not talking about just a 3D model in Clo. We're talking about the animations and everything else that comes with it as well. So it's quite a overwhelming thing for education. So whereas the hunger's there, the need from industry's there, the hunger's there from the students, the willingness is there from the educators, but just the establishments, there's just a lot of red tape and a lot of barriers, and also a little bit of lack of understanding as well. So fashion is an alien world to anyone that doesn't work in it, and there are a lot of preconceptions about what the fashion industry does. People don't really associate it with the socks that they're wearing or the shirt on their back. So I think personally for me, I've been fighting the fight at a few universities that we work with to try and get the right people to say yes and the right pots of money to open up. But yeah, it's a challenge.
Yeah, no, definitely. It sounds like there's still some steps being needed to like fill that gap.
Yeah.
So what would you say, like, if you were going to pitch the advantages of 3D, let's say to someone who's never used it or never even heard of it, what would you say are the advantages over traditional methods? Let's say if you were pitching to someone why they should use 3D.
Where to begin? Yeah, no, I think that's actually quite relevant, because we occasionally talk to, so I spend a lot of my time in Southeast Asia talking to manufacturers. I'm going to Sri Lanka tomorrow to meet with our team down there. And in those settings, even some fairly large manufacturers are still not really on 3D. Well, I say quite large. Most of the medium and large size are already fully on 3D. But there certainly are some who are not. And I think it's relatively easy today to see where all the benefits are. There are systems today where, for example, we being one of those, where if you build your model in 3D to begin with, variant creation is incredibly fast. So we were having a couple of 2 years ago, we were having one of our Sri Lankan manufacturers was working for a British brand on baby clothing. And they were able to put together, I think, about 250 variants approved in 2 days, which is, you try to do that with a scissor. I mean, yeah. So it's the speed of which you can go, and it's very easy to pick up. Let's say that next year you have a continuity line, you want to produce just a variant of the same product you had last year. Usually that's a double-digit percentage of your products, right? For most setups. Then you can go back and you can take that model out and you can create more variants on top of the existing model without really changing very much. So you have all the history of everything you have made. There's an upfront investment, though. You need people who have been trained by Erica or someone like Erica to be able to build the models, and you need to have designers who can do this. So there's upfront investment, and I think that's been one of the challenges with the industry, which has really low margins. Right, this is a low margin business on the manufacturing side in particular.
Yeah.
And to sink a lot of capital into these kind of investments is a bit scary upfront. But also, I think that's not a realistic debate today if you are ambitious, or at least you're a certain size, because a lot of the brands are going to want to talk to you in 3D and they want to see your 3D stuff anyways. So you will be at a severe disadvantage if you don't do that. So I think that's sort of, you kind of have to. I think it's not really a choice today to not do 3D if you're over a certain size at least.
Yeah, definitely. Some of the brands that we work with expect 3D from their suppliers, and they will move suppliers if they can't provide that. What they do struggle with is managing the fit across their different suppliers. That's a different conversation, but so there's so many reasons why digital is appealing but also useful. And initially I actually thought, so when we first saw 3D fashion and we saw this wave of like the metaverse and these really creative things, me being practical from industry, it annoyed me a little bit. I thought it kind of took the shine away from digital product creation and the impact that being able to fit before you have a sample can have on industry. But actually, I think in terms of the sustainability argument, a lot of people go into fashion because they enjoy the creative process. So being able to create garments without buying fabric, having the space, having the tools, having the machines, and just be able to express your ideas and play with things. Like I think it's kind of gone back the other way now, and it's undervalued as a way of still being expressive and fashion still being an art form without adding to the issue of waste in the industry, I think. And then I agree with all of your points when it comes to industry. As somebody that is a product developer, in my past career, the fit part of 3D product development is what excites me a lot. Mm-hmm. And I think there should be more education around building trust for the fit of your 3D product. So like more, maybe this is something that CAD for Fashion will do, but actually proving the fit from digital to real sample. We're going to do that with one of our clients we're starting to work with in Clo, because it's lingerie product. So that's crucial for them, that they trust the fit and they also know the limitations, because actually with lingerie there are some limitations. But there's just unlimited benefits from a creative perspective and also digital product creation perspective, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, super excited to it, because you can, as a creative, you can see what things would look like, right? Before you needing to have physical samples made or anything, you can really sort of see your vision come to life, which is super exciting. And there's also the element of sample approval being super key, right? Mm-hmm. So I was outside of Dhaka at the factory there, and I was talking to a factory manager, and he said that his annual FedEx bill was $1.5 million in physical samples.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but do you need all those approvals, all those physical samples? And he just goes, well, every time the brand sees a seam moved 1 millimeter, I have to FedEx them a new sample. Mm-hmm. So, and then at the same time, they yell at me for not being sustainable enough. Right?
For their audits.
Which is crazy. It's completely crazy. And because we are end-to-end and because we allow approval processes in the product, we're trying to reduce this. So I'm under no illusion. So in the case with baby clothes, we were able to get to like 90% sample approval digital, which is kind of bizarre. But baby clothing is a bit particular, because like when you know the fabric and you know that you kind of you know, so it's not so scary to do those approvals. But even if you can reduce sample approvals just by 50%, then that's a lot of carbon and it's a lot of money.
Especially in those initial, like you say, in those initial design range building phases. So for a large brand, the amount of samples that they will have being sent in for an initial range build, and they will now I know a lot of the brands that we're working with are trying to reduce this, and they have been actively reducing this, but they would insist on samples for every color range. They'd insist on an extra sample in a different scale of print, just in case their design manager wants to switch it out. We'd cover all. So I worked for a girls wear supplier, and for 3 options we would sample 25 designs for their meeting.
And then you start multiplying by number of products, and then you can multiply by number of brands, and now you start seeing there's a fleet of airplanes just going across planet Earth bringing these physical samples, and I would argue 75% of those completely wasted.
100%. But the trust needs to be there. So even with those brands that are reducing them, they'll still insist on having one sample in the fabric to have next to their 3D their screen. And I think that's also, an issue, that we are developing 3D models and then viewing them on a 2D screen. To me, that's like insane. So I think, like you were saying earlier, actually, with the communication and the collaboration, till there is a better way of viewing these 3D objects and trusting the scale, trusting the fit of them, I think there's always going to be some pushback and some play it on the safe side mentality from a lot of the brands that are trying to adapt the technology.
Yeah, but at the same time, though, I do see a move in this direction, and I see a whole bunch of different solutions that have come up, some good and some less so. But the interesting bit is, I think there's a common understanding that we just can't being this wasteful. I mean, not only is it unsustainable, it's also, you know, financially wasteful. It's everything about it. It's just, and it's slow sitting around waiting for the samples.
Exactly.
So it's a process that clearly needs fixing, right? So, but it's interesting. We come back to this idea of trust, right? That takes a long time to build trust. I think there is a generational change. Like, one of the interesting things, if you go back to this factory I was in Bangladesh, the 3D techs who design the 3D model and the designers who puts on the colors and the prints and everything else, they don't even sit on the same floor.
Okay.
They're not physically in the same room, nothing. And that is kind of fascinating to me. And it sort of shows this, that you typically have had a lot of these siloed approaches to things, right? The idea that the designer is also a 3D technician is a fairly Western sort of thing. You don't see that in the big manufacturing plants. Most of the designers have some experience with 3D, but they're not the ones doing work in Clo or V-stitches.
Yeah, that's interesting, because the expectation is the designer. It's on the designer to now all of a sudden pick up being able to edit pattern pieces and make sure that things sew together correctly. And those are completely, that's the thing, they're completely segregated. And that's one of those things too, where the designers have been so resistant to doing anything in 3D. They basically sort of just prodded the 3D tech around to do the work. It's a very strange mechanism, and part of the solution we're trying to implement is making it fun and easy for designers to work in 3D without making it too scary, because we know that for them, in this kind of specialized environment, they're not going to become authoring tool masters, any of them. That's not really what I'm interested in. But they're also terrified of 3D, which is completely pointless. So we're trying to make it fun and easy and all those kind of things. But that's a very specialized or large-scale manufacturer. This is so siloed. It's interesting, though, that's the same approach we take as well. So if it's a design team, especially so in like a product that's mainly like licensed product, they don't tend to do much with the garment shapes, but they will put their print and graphics and things on there. So instead of teaching them how to use the 3D software, we are developing a way for them to use the 3D software where they don't have to touch certain things. So we've got like modular blocks set up.
That's what Embodee is, actually, essentially. That's a good description of what we actually are.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we're trying to do.
Maybe we should have a conversation outside of here.
I think we should, because you're
Yeah,
exactly right. We come from that realization that, holy cow, this needs some fixing.
And it's and honestly, one of the main things that we focus on at CAD for Fashion, because we deal with people face to face when we're training, the fear is something that overrides their ability to listen to what we say. So it's something that we are really conscious of. It's that word fear that stops them from remembering anything that we've just showed them, because they're so overwhelmed with this learning curve they've got mid to end career a lot of the time. So
yeah, that's really interesting that you both touched on the idea of fear and trust and building that trust. So one thing I was wondering is, what else do you think the industry still has to learn in terms of like digital product creation above the learning curve and that fear and trust? Is there any other things you're seeing, any other barriers, or would you say that's like the main barrier?
I think that's overarching. And then from my perspective as a trainer, a big barrier is time. So they might be ready to invest in the technology, the computers, the training, but those people being trained need to take time out of the business. And actually, to learn the software properly, it's quite a lot of time over quite a long period if you do it properly, and if you want to get to a high level quite quickly. So for some places, that's just not an option. So they'll end up starting with like 2 designers, and then those 2 designers are in a different world to the rest of the team. And there tends to be challenges with then applying to real world situations and actually really stretching their skills and utilizing what they've learned. So they forget really quickly. So it's sometimes we follow up with clients after training and it's been 3 weeks, they've not touched the software again because they've got a deadline or a side.
This is just such a good point.
And it's some of our clients, we say it's not worth it for you guys unless you can carve out that time, unless you're ready, unless you have a new department that you're going to dedicate to the 3D product part and work in collaboration with the designers, which is not a great idea for their business, but it will give them that chance to really get going with using the skills. And I think a lot of strategies at the moment are just hoping they hire in the right talent.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is with that is that talent usually comes from education, who have had that final year module of CLO, who are confident enough to just keep clicking until it works. And then you have the problem with quality of the work. So it's I feel like I'm being very negative now. It's just everyone.
No, but it's so important. I was sitting here nodding through everything you said, because we have just changed pretty much everything in how we do training when we bring people on board to our platform, because we naively thought, like I think a lot of actors think, that you can just go through the training and then done, and then now everything will work and just leave it there. And what we saw happening a lot of times was that they typically would find like a slow period where they would do the training, and then there would be some kind of race because they needed to do fulfillment, and it became very busy, and they didn't have time to use the platform because they still had old stuff they needed to deal with. And then suddenly they come back a month later. Now they haven't touched it in a month, and like nothing works. So, and then they would have forgotten everything. And we got a lot of support requests, and we end up tearing our hair out. And we're like, but we trained all this a month ago, guys. And then, so now we change everything around. And the way we do it is that we ask to find a period where they will be working on products, and we take the products and we integrate their products into the training. So we train only using their actual products. So that means
that's the best way to do it.
Exactly, right? So that it becomes completely realistic, and that they, after we're done with the training, they just continue using the system for this. Because we found that if you do it theoretical, it doesn't work. So now we actually ask them to show us the products they want to make first, and we actually spend a bit of time thinking about how to talk to them about it beforehand. So we have gotten a lot more thoughtful in how we do this, because we had exactly the same experiences. Like exactly this. We spent 2 days of training people there, and we have a platform which is a bit easier than it doesn't have the same kind of complexity, but it still needed 2 days. But we realized afterwards there was just no way. So not only do we train more, but we are very mindful of training very relevant, and only when we know that it's the right time for them.
It has to be the perfect time. And we've tried to do that a few times with one of the brands that we've worked with, and it's meant that it's coming up to 14 months since we first started this, and it just keeps getting pushed and pushed and pushed. And it's just the nature of it. But it's also, if there's a slight doubt that they're not going to be able to achieve what they need to in this real world project via what we're going to do with them, then they will abandon and push it back to another project.
Commit, right? I mean, 3D isn't so, you can't dabble in this. You have to say, now we are going to go for a digital product creation process, and we're going to use 3D for our stuff. And essentially what we're going to do is do that as much as we can from end to end, and we'll do it with everything that it makes sense to do, and we commit to doing it. Because if you don't do that, then exactly like you said, the moment you run into the slightest stumbling block, and then they're going to say, oh no, we don't have time, let's go back to our old process.
Yeah, and it's the sustaining the training as well. So although we might have an effective period of a couple of days of solid training, it's then picking that up with a shorter 3-hour session to continue a month later, then 3 months later, and then drop-in sessions 6 months, 12 months, because there are so many different nuances to what they might be creating, especially in children's wear and girls wear. And one of my tutors, one of her freelance projects is costume. So some of the crazy things that she has to create on 3D models, and you need the confidence to be able to find your way with that. And that only comes with good training and lots of practice. So they have to be using it every single day. So I think that's the biggest challenge out of everything. If they're willing, ready, they have the budget, they've got the team, it's carving out that time and finding that right moment to implement that training and get started with it. That's the biggest barrier.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so I'm conscious of the time, so I just want to touch on some positive topics to end. So what would you guys say is like some of your success stories that you as a company have had, or you in your career, in terms of 3D in fashion, or if you say what a brand's done that you think is successful, just anything that you think is worth noting in terms of like success with 3D in the industry?
Why did you start, Erica?
So I feel like I am in the trenches, as they say, with a lot of the brands that I'm working with, and I am very proud of a lot of their progress with things. And it is from our perspective we are your how should I put it? I do sometimes say we're counselors as well as trainers. We are here to support you and help guide you to the right decisions. And for some of our brands, it means picking up new technology to fill the gap. So, for example, with Next, who we've just worked with, they are on their 3D product journey. They are using 3D samples for a lot of their sort of sign-offs and even some of their fit. But when it comes to the more technical products like tailoring and outerwear and accessories, the time it takes for the very small team to create those visuals for just a sign-off meeting, it's not worth it for them. So until they have more of a library of shapes that they can start from, we are filling that gap with AI tools. So taking a sketch and turning it into a photograph, a 3D render image, and then using Photoshop to add the right trims, recolor, that software is called Newark. We've shared quite a lot of their software because I think it really does fill in that gap, because as a 2D software trainer as well, we spend a lot of time teaching people Illustrator. Illustrator is quite tricky to actually use. And why would you spend a long time learning Illustrator if you can do a rough sketch and get a photograph straight away that's going to give you a correct visual in the correct fabric, in the correct colours? That's a sort of initial starting point that then make your selections based on, and then move on to digital product creation, 3D product creation. So for me, that's the most exciting thing that we're working on at the moment, trying to help people plug those gaps where things aren't quite working or they can't quite get to the stage they want to just yet.
Yeah, I think on my side, I mean, it's interesting because, you know, we've been around for about 2 years live now, and you have a lot of hypotheses about, like, what is it that people are going to really like about your product? What is it that they're not going to be so excited about? Like, what's important to people? What is less important? And how they're going to use it, right? So you have all these ideas, and then you go out and then you meet the real world. And then you realize not everything is exactly as you expected, strangely enough. And it's interesting to observe this, right? So I think there's basically like 3 little things for me. Like, the first thing was this: I didn't realize how scary many designers think 3D is. And that was a big realization. And boy, did we use a lot of energy on trying to make that less scary. And it's incredibly rewarding. So that would be my first thing, would be to say that it's incredibly rewarding when you see a bunch of people who express a lot of skepticism, to say the least, initially, and then come out of it sort of playfully messing around with it, right? That's hugely gratifying for all of us who are sort of working to try to make it easy and fun to do. And then there's the second bit, is just this notion that you can actually do something good with your product. I mean, I think we all would like to be able to say that what we're doing is actually on the net good. And I used to work in banking and finance for a decade, so my soul is forever tarnished. But it does feel like it helps a bit when I can see all the physical samples that are just not being sent because people are getting their approvals done, which to me is incredibly gratifying. And I think the third thing and final thing is sort of a fun point, which is emergent behavior. So the kind of stuff that you didn't expect. So one of the fun things that happened with us, which I did not see coming at all, was, so we offer a web platform, of course, where you can sort of see all your products in 3D. You can create variants of your existing products, and you can all this stuff, and collaborate and comment and all this stuff, which is a lot of fun, and that's great, and it works for design and approvals and all this kind of stuff. What I did not expect was I was getting a picture that was filmed or taken sort of slightly discreetly, and it turns out that at the same time, 2 of our customers have started using it for selling. Because it turns out that when you have buyers coming to see you, to be able to show, and one of them was intimates, so it was a lot of women's underwear, and to be able to sort of have that on a big TV, which was a touch screen, and let the buyer just sort of spin around and zoom in and look at the details and all that kind of stuff, and sort of have a really sort of fun discussion and dialogue in that. I did not expect that at all. That's so when we saw that happen in 2 customers almost at the same time, we were like, holy cow, we had to, like, how can we support, how can we make that even more, you know, exciting? And that was fun because we did not see that one coming, and they were super happy because the buyers really liked it. So that was my nicest surprise of all of 2023.
Amazing. And lingerie is a difficult product type to sample as well. So yeah, those guys have always relied on like 2D CADs, Illustrator sketches, past samples, Photoshop. So for them to have a more realistic product is like a breath of fresh air for them. They have to wait until bulk is produced a lot of the time to see the final result.
Yeah, because they were there on site and they had access to some physical samples, but there were a lot more variants in the system that was just made in 3D. Or for them to then just easy with their fingers tap through the different variants, zoom and all that stuff. That was cool. And then you sort of created a competitive advantage for your customer. I mean, there's nothing more fun than that. So no, that was really great fun. So that's the highlight of 2023, I think, for me.
Wow.
So as we're approaching the end of the session, I was just wondering if you guys had any questions you'd like to ask each other.
That's a good one.
No, you on the spot there, but
yeah, that's absolutely fine. I am a little bit curious, Erica. How do they feel about sort of the export and getting stuff out of, because you train mostly in Clo, I understand, right?
Yeah.
So how do you, because that's something we always struggle a little bit with, about like training people to be good at exporting to use the platform and stuff. It's like, how scary is that process? Because that seems to me like a really scary thing technically.
It is. I think it also stems back to just traditional pattern cutting software. Even exporting from Lectra and opening in Gerber never goes smoothly. So I think there's some residual from that still happens actually. But also I think it's just a whole new level of technical. So I've been training designers in just Illustrator and Photoshop, and they find that really daunting and overwhelming. And there's nothing real that's going to be produced anywhere from that. It's just a visualization. So if you then now say, well, we're going to create something on this more complex software that actually they're going to rely on this to create the sample, all of a sudden it's too much pressure for them. So I think it's very daunting. But we do, so what we're looking to do in September is we have our Clo intermediate and beginner courses, but we are going to have a like production ready Clo course. So a course that's specifically for prepping your files and making sure your files are ready for production. So making sure that your tech packs are correct, making sure that you've got your seam allowances and looking at the export settings. And because we have access to some other software as well, showing them what it looks like if you open it in Gerber or if you open it in Style 3D, for example, and where there might be some seam allowances, issues. Seam allowances missing, rogue notches, whatever happens, so that we can help navigate those. Because I think so myself and my 3D tutor Laura, we're both product developers, and we're kind of like, I don't know, but let's figure it out. Whereas designers kind of, they're creative, they like to follow their creative processes, and these technical problems kind of really stump them. So I think we're using our skills to help make people more confident in problem solving for themselves when it comes to digital. So yeah,
that makes perfect sense. Thanks.
So I have lots of questions for you. But
I think we definitely have to do it. We have to do it.
Yeah, definitely. I thought it was really interesting that you've noticed the same things about the people involved in what we do. So I would say, like, I would want to know from you, what do you feel like is the best approach to win people over when it comes to pitching your 3D technology, or perhaps they're already using it and they're struggling? Like, how do you change their mindset or get them to sort of think in the right way?
I think, I mean, first of all, that's a hard problem, right? Especially when you're dealing with people who are under a lot of stress and you don't have much time. I mean, our answer to it is that we tend to do two things. Number one is we try to convince them that this can actually be fun.
Yeah.
Because it really can be fun.
Yeah.
Like once you're confident and you're relaxed and you can move quickly on this thing, it's one heck of a tool, right? It really is a good tool. The other thing we did, and that goes back to what I mentioned earlier on, that we have to sort of rebuild our training a little bit based on our experiences, was that we recognized that we needed to spend a lot more time just being in people's environment while they're trying to do their actual work. And that sounds like something that sounds similar to what you also were talking about with the follow-up courses, all of that. You really have to try to take the fear out of it, because there's always this thing that if they hit a snag that they can't get by and there's no one in the room who can help, then that's incredibly difficult. So one of the things we haven't implemented yet, but we're thinking about, or not thinking about, we're planning on doing, is to have local sort of super users when we have a large enough base. Like, so if there's 10+ users, then having one of those or maybe two of those be super users who know more and also have direct connection to our guys so they can get feedback and help really quickly, because they will take all the easy stuff themselves. But you know, this is kind of tricky, but we are helped by the fact that there's a realization, I think, by everyone in the industry that like this is going, and there's going to be a workflow digital end-to-end, right? All the way from the early stuff, which is your domain, right, on the authoring tools, through our sort of middleware, and all the way up to 3DEEMEE and the virtual fits. All that is incredibly important, right? And it becomes one big flow in the end, and people see that going. And you can clearly see how the technology goes. And you know that the generation under you, even though not all being digital natives, are certainly a lot less scared about these tools. So if you are a little bit older, say you are a designer who is like 40 or 30 rather than 20, then you're probably aware that you should consider, you need in your own self-interest to up your skills, because the generation that comes after has a lot less resistance to.
Definitely.
So there's like carrots and sticks everywhere in this kind of
definitely.
So at the same time, everyone is trying to do a job and with limited time, and so there is real challenges there. But I feel we've gotten to the point everyone agrees that, hey, this needs to, just how do we do it?
Yeah, exactly. Well, with that, as we close today, we just want to say thank you both again for attending and being a part of 3DEEMEE's webinar series Across the Chain 3D in Fashion. If you'd like to share where it's the best place to find both of your companies, like what?
So you can find us on all platforms, CAD for Fashion. We're even on TikTok, which is fun. But if you want to connect with us, LinkedIn is a really good place.
I feel less cool than Erica now, because we're on pretty much everything except TikTok. You can find us on Embodee, but instead of a Y at the end, there's a double E. So Embodee.com, Embodee on LinkedIn, Embodee on Facebook, Embodee on Insta. We are everywhere, easy to find.
Perfect. So thank you again. We appreciate your time and participation, and we look forward to connecting with you guys on future events. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.